You and I, we live our lives on spreadsheets, databases, the cloud. It's all digital. But what if all your data had to be etched onto a wet slab of clay? Let's go back 4,000 years to Mesopotamia and try to figure out how they tackled one of history's biggest data management problems and the incredibly modern solution they might have come up with.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start by figuring out why these clay records were so important to a growing empire. Then we'll dive into the just staggering scale of their bureaucracy. We'll look at how they actually stored all this information, get clear on the huge difference between an archive and a library, and then finally, we'll uncover the really surprising truth about what actually survived all these thousands of years for us to find.
All right, so first stop, let's get a handle on the basic problem the ancient Sumerians were up against. I mean, why did they need to write so much stuff down in the first place? Well, it all boils down to a problem that every single society faces when it starts to grow: complexity. No, really, think about it for a second. You don't have computers, you don't have paper, you don't even have calculators. So how in the world do you keep track of taxes, manage giant work crews, and control an economy for thousands of people when all you've got is a pointy stick and a lump of mud? That was the challenge.
And you've got to understand, this didn't happen overnight. This was a slow burn over centuries. It all started back in the early dynastic period as cities got bigger. Then it just exploded during what's called the Ur-3 period, which was just this incredibly centralized controlling time. And finally, it all got refined into these massive state-run collections under the Neo-Assyrian Empire, who basically tried to collect all the knowledge in the world.
So what really kicked all of this into high gear?
Well, you can probably guess. It was money. The moment society started shifting to using silver for payments, you suddenly had an urgent, desperate need for good, solid, verifiable accounting. You had to track who got paid for what and when.
All this growing complexity, it demanded a seriously powerful solution. And the answer, especially during that Ur-3 dynasty, well, it was simple on paper, but just staggering to think about. They decided to create a bureaucracy on a scale the world had literally never seen before.
And this quote from the scholar Norman Yaffe, wow, it just says it all. They weren't just counting coins anymore. They developed this obsession with tracking absolutely everything. It was a system where, basically, all of material life was put into a category and given a code. That's what let them organize their society in a way that was just impossible before.
And get this. This tablet right here is the perfect example of that obsession. This isn't some epic poem or a king's decree. It's an attendance sheet for a workshop. They were keeping meticulous records of who showed up to work, what they got paid in rations, and exactly what they made. This was data-driven management 4,000 years before anyone heard of Microsoft Excel.
And just look at the sheer amount of information they were capturing. Labor, food, production goals, raw materials, animals, grain, who got what? Every single tiny piece of the state's economy was being tracked on these little clay tablets. It was a massive analog database for an entire civilization.
Okay, so this, of course, creates a whole new headache, right? You've got tens of thousands of these clay tablets. Where do you put them? How do you organize them so you can actually find that attendance sheet from last Tuesday when you need it?
Now, for a long time, the solutions we knew about were pretty straightforward, almost what you'd expect. Archaeologists found little clay labels, which were basically ancient tags for big reed baskets that were just overflowing with tablets. In other places, entire archives were found stuffed into giant clay jars. Simple, and it worked. But turns out that might not be the whole story. Because then, digging in the ruins of a palace at a place called Nimrud, an archaeologist named Max Mallowan found this. And at first glance, it doesn't look like much, does it? Just a bunch of low, rectangular boxes made out of mud brick sitting on the floor of a room that was just littered with tablets. But it gave him a fascinating idea.
Mallowan started to wonder if this was some kind of purpose-built piece of office furniture. He had this theory that what he was looking at was a filing system. He could just picture the ancient scribes sorting incoming tablets into one box and outgoing tablets into another, kind of like a 4,000-year-old inbox and outbox.
So here's the crucial point. Nobody knows for sure. This is still a really lively debate. Was Mallowan right? Was this a sophisticated filing cabinet, or was it something way more boring? Other experts point to similar structures at other sites and say, hey, maybe these were just bins for holding fresh clay for new tablets. Or maybe they were recycling bins, where you toss old tablets, add water, and mush them up to start over. The jury is still out. Okay, now, to really get what's going on with all these tablets, we have to make a distinction that was incredibly important to the ancient Assyrians themselves: the difference between an archive and a library. An archive is pretty much what we've been talking about. It's all the paperwork or clay work that gets generated from just running the government every day. You can think of them as the leftovers of doing business. But a library was totally different. That was a curated collection. That's where they intentionally copied and saved important literary, religious, and scientific texts for the future.
And this difference is even reflected in where we find them. Archives, they usually turn up in palaces, right in the center of government. But the big libraries, like the one at Nimrud, were often found in temples, especially temples for Nabu, who was the god of writing and scribes. It was a sacred duty to preserve knowledge there. And this brings us to our final point, which is maybe the most profound one of all. What is it that actually survived for thousands of years? Is it the carefully preserved library collection, or is it the messy, day-to-day archive? The answer is kind of shocking. This quote from Assyriologist Julian Reed just completely flips the script. His argument is that many of these huge piles of tablets we found, they aren't pristine, organized archives at all. They're just the leftovers, the stuff that got lost, the stuff that was thrown out, the stuff that was literally trampled into the floor when an army burned the city down. Just think about what that means. We thought we were exploring an ancient office, but it turns out we're actually digging through its garbage can. Our clearest window into the Mesopotamian world is often completely accidental. We're not seeing what they chose to save for us, we're seeing what they just happened to leave behind.
And that leaves us with a pretty wild question to think about. If our whole digital world just vanished and future archaeologists were digging through the ruins of our cities, what leftovers would they find? What accidental, discarded bits of data would end up telling the story of who we were?